So yeah, as Floyd said, I'm Oliver Timmis from the AKU Society. So AKU, what we do, so I suppose I should talk about what we did this morning. So our vision is that we have a world where all patients have access to an effective treatment. That's our overall vision. How we do that is through providing patient support, through community building so that no patient has to act alone, and through supporting medical research so we get to that effective treatment. And there's plenty that I'm proud of at the AKU Society, but by far the most important is the staff. There's actually two in the audience today. There's Lydia and Kieran sat in the middle. So this picture was taken just a couple of days ago, so it's a little blurry, but it was taken just a couple of days ago at our International Patient Workshop in Liverpool. This was a fantastic day. It was a brand new thing for us where we actually managed to invite patients from all over the world to come to Liverpool to have access to experts in the disease, to learn how to self-manage and learn how to better cope with living with AKU. But we couldn't have done it without a large team and a team that could work together to actually provide such an enthusiastic audience for the patient workshop. So to me, staff are the most important aspect of a charity. So when I was putting together these slides, I realised that you actually spend more time with your work colleagues than with your family. So if you spend an 8-hour day, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, you end up spending a lot of time with these people. So you want to make sure that they're people that you actually get on well with. I think if it's in a large organisation, it doesn't matter so much. If you're in a small charity, often there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And that's a small group. It becomes more of a family, I think. And so you have to make sure that you're working with people that you get on well with and that you can work effectively as a team. They're also the face of the charity. When there's only a few people that work in your charity, they're the people that will attend conferences, that will meet with the organisations you work with. So you have to be comfortable with them representing your views as a charity. They have to represent your vision as well as you would. And I'm also aware that there's a few people in the audience today that don't have any staff. There's probably a mix here. There's a few charities that employ staff, a few that haven't got any staff yet. So why do we need staff? So these are just a few points. So essentially it allows you to expand. If you're just working, as Dan said, it's just him and his wife, they're a great team, I would imagine, but they're limited to what they can do. There's only 2 people. By employing more staff, you can expand what you do. So I just wanted to go through 5 different points today. So start off with a job description, where to advertise, then how to interview, and then preparing for the first day and developing your staff into an effective team. So let's start with the job description. So essentially, this is identifying the need for the role. So once you've decided that you need to employ a member of staff, you need to work out what they're actually going to do. That's the key point. So how we tend to do it is by looking at what other charities do, essentially. So you can have a look and see what other charities that are working in a similar kind of area to you, how they advertise for their staff. And I'll come to a little later an example of what we do at the AKU Society. You'll need to think about how this role will fit into existing roles. So this is if you've already got a couple of members of staff, how will that third person come in? And how will that change the dynamics of the team? What work will that take away from the existing staff? Will that create brand new work that those existing staff didn't do beforehand? So at the AKU Society, we tend to split things into these 3 key areas. There's patient support, there's communications, and then there's fundraising. And all the staff that we employ tend to work within those 3 overall aspects. But of course, there's going to be interactions between them. So for instance, if a fundraising officer, Lydia, wanted to arrange an event, she would have to work with a patient support team to get patients on board. She'd have to work with a communications team to actually advertise the event. So all of them are going to work together, but that's how we tend to split vaguely into the 3 key areas. You also need to think about the budget, and this is key. So what salary is appropriate? So we tend to, again, look at what other charities are doing, what kind of salaries are other charities offering, and you should be offering something within the same kind of region. But it's not just about salary. So say that you've worked out you've got £20,000 to employ a member of staff. You might just think, well great, I'll give a £20,000 salary and that's it. But that's not it. You've also got to think about pension contribution, national insurance, some of the legal stuff, if you need background checks or contracts, if you need to have a training budget and a travel budget associated with that training budget. If you need rent, do you then need to have an extra desk in your office? Do you need to rent an office in the first place? Do they need equipment? Do they need computers? Do they you need a printer, all this kind of stuff you need to build into the salary. So it's not just a salary, it's everything that goes along with it too. So once you've got that, will it be funded by a project? So quite often, a lot of the staff that we employ tend to be funded as part of a project. So for instance, we'll get a grant from the Big Lottery Fund, and then as part of that grant will include a salary for one person. Quite often when you're applying for that funding, the funder will ask for the job description. That's why it's quite key to actually work out what they're going to do and how they'll fit in with the rest of your team, because quite often funders will need that. Or is it going to be funded from your reserves, from your individual fundraising, from your membership fees? If so, do you know that it's going to be a permanent position? Are you confident that you can provide that salary for several years in a row? Or will this just be a short-term position? Will it just be, we're going to be funding this person for 1 to 2 years just for a short-term project? So will it be a permanent position, or will it be a short-time position? So this is an example of the job description that we use at the AKE Society. So you can see it's just for the charity officer, it's a really vague title. So this is how we tend to lay it out. We have the salary quite clearly put at the top. We then say if it's going to be a full-time position or a part-time position, who they report to or who they supervise. Obviously that's only applicable in a larger team. Where they're based, the hours they're going to work, the start date, and then we go to the descriptions. We have a description of what the AKE Society is. I think this is quite key, because we're going to be looking for people that actually want to work for your charity. Not just for people that want a job, but people that actually are enthusiastic about working for your specific charity. So give them that information, explain what the AKE Society is, what your vision is, what your dreams are for your patients, and what you hope that they can achieve. And then a little bit more about this position. So how does this individual position contribute to that overall goal? I think this is the quite empowering bit about a job description. So it shows that person what change they individually can have to your charity. We then list the key activities. So this tends to be the bulk of the application, so perhaps a page long. Just bullet points listing exactly what they're going to be doing. They're going to be running the website, they're going to be running the Twitter, they're going to be completing fundraising applications. Just list it bullet point by bullet point what exactly their role is going to involve. And then we have benefits of working at the AKE Society. So this can include things like the pension contribution you offer. So it's now a legal requirement in the UK that all employers have to offer a workplace pension scheme. And so you can include some information here about what that includes. Also what annual leave you offer, what training benefits you offer, if there's opportunities to travel to conferences like today, for instance. And then finally, the person specification. So this is the what you hope the person already has, what skills they have, what knowledge they already have. So for instance, this could be experience of already working for a charity, or experience of running a website, or ability to design a website, something like that. Really defined skill that you hope they have, or that they definitely need to have to do this role. And hopefully this should give enough information to a potential applicant looking at the role to see if they're interested, and to see if they're going to fit into the position that you have on offer. So once you've got that, once you've got a good job description, where do you then advertise? So it's important to always give enough information when you advertise the job description. So this is going to include who to contact within the organisation. So once someone sees the job description, you need to then tell them where to go, who to contact, but also what to send. So quite often we ask for a covering letter and a CV, quite straightforward. And a lot of people already have at least a template prepared that they can then send across to you. And it may also include a portfolio. So for instance, say you're looking for someone to run your website, you may have ask for a portfolio of previous websites that they've been involved with, what kind of work they've done in the past, for instance. You also need to set a deadline date. So quite often we tend to advertise about 2 to 3 weeks for positions, but it could also be based on when a project is starting, when a previous member of staff is leaving, or when you need them to start. These are the places that we tend to use for advertising. So the only one that is paid for that we tend to use is charity jobs. So last time I checked, it was about £200 to advertise on charity jobs, and by far the bulk of our applications come through charity jobs. So I think it's worth the cost. It's a relatively small amount, and it's something that if it's part of an application, a funding application that's funding this position, and the recruitment costs can actually be included into that funding. We also tend to look at university career services. So the APU site is based in Cambridge, so obviously it's a big student city. There's a lot of students looking for jobs. So we tend to find that quite useful. We also advertise on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. So organisations such as the Genetic Alliance or Rare Disease UK are quite often willing to help you advertise and to share any new positions that are coming up. So we tend to find that quite useful. And I've had quite a few applicants come through social media. And then your existing networks. So that can be other charities that you work with, or other organisations you work with. If they can help you share word that you've got a new position opening up, potentially that can lead to applicants. And then, especially for volunteers, so unfortunately a lot of my presentation is going to be focusing on recruiting staff and not volunteers, but if you want to do volunteers, there's going to be local voluntary services and also student hubs, which we've used quite a few times. So student hubs is it's an organisation that links together a lot of the big universities in the UK. So that includes Cambridge and Oxford, but also a lot of the London universities, I think Bristol University's in there, and perhaps Birmingham as well. And so they do a lot of the legwork for you, and we find it quite useful for recruiting volunteers. So what they do, they'll interview students across the UK, they'll end up with a database of students that are looking for a volunteering option. You then give them that option, and they then match the students to you. So they do a lot of the work for you. So student hubs tends to be quite a useful one. And generally, I tend to avoid using agencies. So it seems that every time I put out a job description into the public, I'll get contacted by an agency saying, you know, we can find you the perfect candidate that's only going to cost you £15,000 or something like that, which, I don't know, for me is too much money, and I imagine for most small charities, that's not going to be something that's going to be feasible. So we tend to avoid agencies, so the only page one I tend to use is charity jobs. So once you've advertised, hopefully you're going to get people applying for the job. So now you need to interview them. At the APU Society, we use a process called top grading, which I'll take you through. So this, unfortunately, is a very American-looking cover of the top grading manual. It looks a little cheesy, but I promise you it is actually a very good read. So what this does is assumes that CVs are mostly promotional. So we tend to ask for CVs, because a lot of people tend to have them already prepared, but generally they're promotional. They're an advertising tool, essentially. So I'm sure that most people in the audience have written a CV. You're only going to include the very best of what you can do. You're not going to focus on any negatives, you're just going to focus on what you're good at. So CVs are useful up to a point, but top grading assumes they're promotional and so looks at other ways of assessing a candidate. It also includes quite a long screening process. So as part of top grading, there's around a 2 to 3 hour interview with a candidate, which a lot of people when I've talked to about will kind of walk at this and think that that's way too long to spend interviewing an applicant. But if you look at it in the long term, the person you're going to be working with could be working with you, if you're a small charity, one-to-one for several years to come. So spending a few hours getting to know if they're the right person for the job, to me, seems like a good idea. And overall, it's looking for a track record of success. So it's not necessarily looking for candidates that have got, you know, amazing degrees or amazing results. It's looking for people who are enthusiastic and who are generally successful at what they do. They tend to join a new job and they tend to do well. That's what top grading looks for. So this is roughly the process that we follow. So we put out a job description and we get CVs coming back in. We roughly get around 50 plus applicants per role. We then ask them to fill a career history form. I'll come to that on the next slide. But essentially, a career history form summarises the information in a CV in a fair way to give you a better comparison between candidates. We ask pretty much every candidate that gives a CV to fill a career history form, and the vast majority don't bother. And immediately that tells me that they're not suitable for the role. If you can't be bothered to fill in a short form, then they're probably not going to be very good as a candidate in the role. So if there's 50, around 15 would perhaps fill in a career history form. Of those, we then pick the top 5 and do a short phone interview. It's roughly about 20 minutes, and just getting to know the candidate and perhaps going a little bit in depth if there's something interesting or unusual in their career history form or something you want to know more information about. So of those 5 that we can do a phone interview with, we'll probably roll out another couple of candidates and then do face-to-face interviews with around 2 to 3 candidates. So as I mentioned, these face-to-face interviews tend to last around 2 to 3 hours. So generally we can do that in one day. So generally we try to do 2 candidates, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So we spend an entire day with them, we get to know them incredibly well, and see if they're actually suitable for the role. So you're looking not just for a candidate that can do the job, but also a candidate that personally you can get on well with. Because if they're going to be joining your small team, you have to make sure to avoid conflict as much as possible. So if those who interview, we then ask for references on normally the top candidates or the top two if you get someone quite special coming along. So I mentioned the career history form that we use. So this is a brief example of what the career history form would cover. So essentially it's everything that you would include in a CV. It's looking at all your past experience, every job that you've had since leaving school or university. So it just goes through every job one by one. It looks at how they got on in the job. It looks at their relationship with their supervisor. But quite often, what we do in top grading is we do this duality thing, where we look at what did you most like about the job and what did you least like about the job. And by asking these kinds of questions, people actually tend to open up a little bit more about what sort of their negatives are. So it seems to be a big issue that a lot of people will just focus on the positives. Quite rightly, they're looking for a job, they want to look like they're an amazing candidate, they just want to tell you about the good things. But as an interviewer, you need to look for the negatives. So by asking these questions, it starts to open them up to that process. We then look at any gaps in career history. So was there a period of 2 years where they didn't have a job, and then look into that. So quite often, we've had candidates that haven't had a very good explanation for that gap in career. So it might be that their mother was very ill and they had to take time off work to look after. Normally, there's a good explanation. But I find these very interesting. And then, of course, looking at education as well. So it's pretty much everything that you would include in a CV anyway, but it's giving a much fairer comparison. You're giving kind of it's almost like doing a clinical trial, I suppose. It's making sure that you have the information presented in the same way for every candidate, so you can look between them and better find out which candidate is going to best fit your role. So when you come down to interviews, this is one of my favourite questions. And it's, why is this role in particular the one that you want? Because for me, if you want to work for a small charity, you have to be enthusiastic. You can't just take the role because you need a job. You have to take the role because there's some kind of reason for you to actually want to achieve something in this role. So we ask these kinds of questions: what attracted you to the role, and what do you hope to achieve? What are your concerns is quite an interesting one as well. And what are the pros and cons of joining the organisation? So quite often when we interview candidates, we ask this question: what do you think are the positives of working at QSite, and what do you think are the negatives? And amazingly, quite a few times we've interviewed candidates, and we've asked them to list the negatives, they've almost pulled themselves out of the role. They wanted a job that is with a big organisation that has so as Dan was saying, a big organisation that has very defined strategy, has very defined budgets, and then when they start to describe what working at QSite was like, they realise actually working for a small charity doesn't necessarily have all that. At the end, they've almost pulled themselves out of the role. So I find that a very interesting question to ask candidates. And the key thing to remember when interviewing is to always trust your doubts. So record everything they say that is good, because you may need to look at that later, but listen out for anything that concerns you and really push on that. So if there's any doubts whatsoever, you must investigate them fully. Because remember, it's the candidate's job to convince you. Normally when you apply, a job advert, you're going to have many more applicants than you have positions. So really, you're then in a buyer's market. You're the one that has to choose the right candidate for the job. So always remember that the candidate is trying to convince you to give them the job. And then finally, when we get to the end of the process, we ask for references. We normally ask for around 3 to 4 references. So 3 of those are typically from the most recent careers. So from their last 3 jobs, for instance. And one of them is a little more personal. Because again, we're looking for a person that's going to fit in well with your existing team. So whether that's just you individually as the founder of the charity, or whether that's a team of 5 people, you need to find someone that's going to fit into that team. And then finally, we also give references on the organisation. So we tend to see it as the candidates interviewing us as well as us interviewing the candidate. So we tend to give the option to give references. So that could be, meeting a phone call with a couple of trustees and perhaps a user. So the person, when they accept the role, is 100% certain that this is the right job for them. Because what we want to avoid is people accepting the role and then after a few months realising that the role isn't the right one for them and leaving. Because for a small charity, having that quick turnover of a few months is going to be incredibly destructive. So when you offer the person a job, you want to be 100% certain that that person is picking the right job for them and that they're going to be with you for a long time to come. So So once you've got your perfect candidate, what do you need to prepare before your first day? So there's a few kind of boring legal stuff. So there's contracts of employment. So if you have never employed anyone before, you need to make sure that you have things like contracts of employment in place. So the speaker earlier on mentioned that quite often law companies are quite happy to give pro bono support to charities. And so our contracts of employment came through a law firm giving pro bono support to us. We gave them what we wanted to include in the contract and they wrote it up for us. Perhaps you need a DBS check, so this is a Directory of Borrowing Services. So it used to be called CRB check, so this is basically police check backgrounds. So if the patient population you work with is involving children or vulnerable adults, it may be something that you need to look at. And you also need to look at pension contributions. So as I mentioned, it's now a requirement that employers in the UK give pension contributions. So you need to look into that system to see what you can contribute and what system you're going to be working with, and if you can afford it. And then there's perhaps other resources you need. So at the APU Society, we have a staff handbook. So it's a short document just listing a bit of background about the society and things like what's the policy on taking leave, on expenses if you're traveling to a conference, just some kind of legal thing, or just some basic information about your charity so that they feel a bit more comfortable about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. You also need to look at equipment. Do you need to buy a computer? Do you need to get them desks? Do they need a badge? That kind of thing before their first day. One of the key things is integration. So I mentioned a few times that in a small charity, you want to make sure that the person fits in well with the existing team. So part of that is including background information. So that could be on your specific disease. So if your new member of staff goes on to a conference, you need to make sure that they feel somewhat comfortable talking about the disease. So provide that background information. But also provide background information on the charity. Who are you? What are your visions? What are your goals? How do you want people to see you as a charity? Also links to relevant people. So some of this would have been done if you did the references on the organisation. But who else do they need to talk to? Are there other trustees they haven't met? Are there other staff they haven't met? What about members? Do they need to meet specific patients that you represent? And then finally, connections with other charities. So I'll come to it later, but training is a key aspect for a new member of staff. And quite often we tend to do training by working with other charities. So is there another charity you've seen that does something better than you? Can you send your new member of staff to go have a chat with them, to perhaps have a mentor with them, to actually learn more about how to apply that to their new role? So in developing your staff and team. So adapting to the new role. This is a key thing. So whether this is your first member of staff or whether this is your fifth member of staff, that person needs to fit into the existing structure. So that could mean working with that person to realise how the organisation works, but also working with the current people you already have in the organisation to see how they're going to adapt to that new person. So it's looking at what's going to change. So do your existing staff already have a job that they do that this new person will be leading on? If so, are they aware that they need to hand over some of the responsibility for that role? And also supervision of staff. So this is key. So once you employ a new member of staff, you need to make sure that they're well supported. Do they have a defined line manager? Are they reporting to you as a founder of the charity, or are they reporting to someone else within your charity? And then the more practical things like annual leave and toil. So hopefully you'll have this already laid out for them. But you need to explain to them what annual leave can be taken. And toil is time off in lieu. So this is, for instance, if you send your staff to a conference, if they're going to be travelling over a weekend, do you then give them that time back? And how do you deal with those kinds of issues? And then finally, regular meetings. So I think this is very key, especially for a new member of staff, is actually having regular meetings with the existing team or with yourself to actually see, to actually monitor how they're working. So at the start, that could be every day or every week. And then as they go on, it may turn to monthly or every couple of months. You need to make sure that you're working with the staff so they actually feel well supported and feel able to do their role properly. So here are a few training options that we use at the APU Society. So split into different columns. So free training, such as from Findacure, is a bit of a no-brainer. Then there's low-cost training. So this is what puts under £100. So the FSI, the Foundation for Social Improvement, they tend to ask for a booking a deposit, and then they give you the deposit back when you attend, but take off a booking fee. So it tends to be very low-cost training. Same with the Small Charities Coalition. And then there's some more high-cost training. So it might be that you have a brand new role and that you need to have a bit more of a, offer a bit more of a variety of training for that person. So these are a few more training options that are a little bit more expensive. So the AMRC tend to look much more at working with researchers, getting research funding. And Director of Social Change, I think, are fantastic, and I believe the speaker earlier on, Uday, was from the DSC. And the media trusts tend to look a lot more at things like social media, on networks, on promotion. And the Institute of Fundraising, of course, looks at fundraising. But also what I think is key is connecting with other charities. So I mentioned before about introducing the new member of staff to other charities. And we've got Kerry in the audience. So I know, for instance, that Ulstrom work with our new fundraising officer to help offer some training so that we can start to develop our own fundraising programs. Team building. So if you've got an existing team, introducing that new member of staff can be quite disruptive. You need to make sure that they gel as a cohesive team. Is this a new member of staff, or is this replacing an existing member of staff? And if so, was that member of staff that left, were they well liked? Are they going to leave a hole in the team? And you need to look at replacing that and making sure that there's not going to be an issue with introducing a new member to the team. So some examples that we do, we've done things like Baking Monday. So this in the office is on a Monday. We tend to have one member of staff bring in a cake that they baked on the weekend. It's then an excuse to have a catch-up on a Monday morning, have a slice of cake, and get to know everyone as a person rather than just an employee. We also do a drawing competition. So this is our Friday afternoons. So unfortunately, we couldn't do it this week because we're at the Findacure conference. So we have a whiteboard in the office, and then every week we choose an animal to draw. And then we judge who was the best drawer for that week. So it's quite simple, it's incredibly low cost. All it costs you is a little bit of time, and perhaps a pen to write on the board. But by doing this, you end up becoming more of a family rather than just a team. And I think that's very key, especially when you have such a small number of people working for a charity. You have to make sure that they work well together. I wanted to leave you with a few other resources. So I think Flora's going to send us around, so no need to copy them down. But there's Bold Resource. So they include policies, including staff contracts. So if you don't have a contract for employment already, that's quite a useful checklist. And also creating appraisal documents. So this is useful if you're looking to run supervisions with your new member of staff. The NCBO also have two how-to guides, one of them on volunteering and one of them on your workforce. So these are more practical information about what legally you need to provide to your volunteers or to your employees and how to go about doing that. So please do check that out if you want more information. And that's it for today, so thank you very much for listening.